Welcome back, stars. We're going to be learning today about hollow earth concepts, specifically a lot of concepts that I originated or were original in my thinking. However, I did check them against what was out there. Some of them I did find were original in thinking, some of them were not. Some of them were proposed in a different way than I proposed them based off the hollow earth. So I'm going to be going through these, okay? First off, we come to, well, let's start with hollow earth and concepts. Hollow earth itself is kind of contradictory because it's not hollow, it has a center star. And concepts is to con. And I'm not trying to con you into anything. I will try to use science and other to explain how all of this works, okay, throughout my video series. But I wanted to dive into some of this stuff before we started. Okay, to give you an idea what's coming as well. First off, we have the center star. I labeled that in 2012. Other people were just calling it core star or star. And if you just label it star, that's incorrect. It is different than an external sun. An external sun is pretty much like an atomic bomb. Fusion and fission and fusion and fission and fusion and fission, creating hydrogen and destroying it over and over and over again. Okay, and it's slowly expanding. All right, a center star is essentially metals, and the same thing that we list when we talk about solid earth. But the reason solid earth doesn't work is because the center star would be covered in magma and hot material, and what we know about Baird magnets is that heat destroys the alignment. Okay, because the molecules are moving so much, it destroys the alignment of magnets, and therefore it cannot be a magnet. Okay, but when we have hollow earth, all right, what we have is we have air exchange over the lip and the edge of the North Pole and through the crack fissure at the South Pole, which I didn't draw here. And air exchange is in and out, creating our wind vortex, our wind direction, and also snow clouds as warm, steamy air exits and hits the outside. But also there's a secondary polar vortex that goes down to the top of the star and brings out charged particulate that creates our auroras, which is also known as a firmament. A firmament, just so you know, has been changed a lot in Bibles lately, but a firmament was originally described as a pillar of light in the midst of the waters that separated the waters from the waters upon the face from those under heaven, okay, under the stars, away from the face, okay? And we have salt water on the outside and fresh water on the inside. So therefore, here's your firmament. But people are now calling it a vault, a dome. Flat Earth is pushing that really hard, and they're reverting back to old, untraditional thinking. From what we've learned, we are regressing, people. But basically, that cold air comes down and touches the poles of each pole of the center star, from the bottom and the top. And this is very cold air. Cold enough to where it cools the center star from top to bottom, aligning it into a powerful magnet. And those bands of metal slowly get to where they start to agitate towards the outer surface on all other surfaces not contacted by the polar vortex. And they work in a pattern to where it gives off heat and light from the pressure and the decay it's under and radiation that provides life inside of the earth. Okay? And we'll get into that more later. The next concept is hypotheses, and this is an original concept by me. Absolutely original. Hollow earth opening air exchange vortex tubes. And what that is when you have an opening to the hollow earth in the water, land, or otherwise, it creates a vortex around it. Right? I called that the polar vortex for the poles, but there are side vortexes too. And those start winding up storms like hurricanes in either one direction or the other, depending on the hemisphere it's on. And those ride out over the water, build up as they're sucking in warm, moist air from the ocean, and that. But when they hit land, they dissipate. Okay, and another one starts up, and another one starts up and floats away and moves away. That's one form. okay? Because those storms also sometimes create vortex tubes that just go out to nowhere. But other times, there are vortex tubes that link from one opening to another. And that is also hollow earth air exchange vortex tube. And I found a transcontinental one, which I'll try to picture in a thumbnail. And that one essentially links the North Pole to the South Pole with a vortex tube in between. It was put out about 3 months ago on all the more conspiracy-based social media when it was found on Google Earth, and people were guessing contrails, chemtrails, all of that stuff. And I even reached out to one of those creators who congratulated me on it, but did not make an updated video. They wanted to stay away from Hollow Earth, obviously. So, but anyways, I will try to picture that as the thumbnail. But I also have them in my groups, and those are listed in the description. And then we come to gravity. Now, gravity in traditional thinking of planets, this is probably not my original thinking on Hollow Earth. It may have been put out by Rodney Clough and other, it's definitely talked about in other places. But essentially what we have is as the planet expands, the crust gets thinner. All right, thicker at the poles still, but thinner in the middle for sure. And the further it expands, the less you will weigh, the less force is on you, and the less downforce the larger humans will eventually get in traditional thinking. The center star stays the same, but especially more so on the inside of the planet, as the less gravity pulling down a being in the crust, and this still remaining consistent, the larger beings get inside. All right? And so when you see a large planet, it doesn't necessarily have more gravity. All right, the hypothesis about diamonds falling on Saturn and Jupiter could be wrong, it could be right. But you have to keep in mind those planets have much more material than Earth. So their gravity is going to be greater regardless, because their center star is going to be greater. Not necessarily because it's bigger, but because it has more volume within the mass and size. All right. So then we come to Tiamat. And what you need to know about this is, first off, when we look at a lot of other planetary systems, solar systems, for planets that are in the habitable region, an overwhelming majority is a sun and a big gigantic planet. A sun and a big gigantic planet with no little planets in between. That seems to be a rarity among other stars. We found a few that are pretty close to that size, but not very many. Then after that will be smaller planets in comparison to that one ginormous one. And with Tiamat, what Zecharia Sitchin said, and what others have said, is he specifically said that a planetary body came and glanced and tore off a side of Tiamat, and that this went flinging off everywhere, and this created Earth. Or vice versa. This was destroyed, creating only the asteroids, and this part created Earth. But I believe it was much more massive than that, and we'll get into that with Titans, because that's what proves that, is the size of these beings. What I believe is that it went through, and it hit this center star, broke it, and pieces of it rained down on the newly forming Earth. The crust was blown wide open, and instead of being like this, originally it blew wide open, wrapped around on itself, and created Mars, Earth, Venus, Mercury. It created all the inner planets. And Titans rained down on it. Okay? And when we get to the Titans, what are they? They are super gigantic elephants, Titan beings that are pretty much human-like. They got 5 digits, fingers and toes. They're just gigantic in size. Plants, tree trunks, all of that stuff fossilized on Earth and petrified. Fossilized is where we just see bones, but petrified is where we see fleshy material, like things that aren't supposed to fossilize, like trees and stuff like that. But if you look up dino mummies, you will find that we have dino mummy fossils where the flesh has petrified into rock. And the researcher that I know who put out all of this in the first place called them Mudfossils, and stuck to a pre-flood notion that the giants were the biblical giants of old and that they died in the flood. But it is my contention that Titans are pre-Earth. Okay? They are They existed within Tiamat. Tiamat was destroyed, creating all the inner planets, and their bodies rained down onto the planets. And we find titans that are, and footprints that are, in granite, which is an igneous rock that is made in the formation of a planet because the extreme heat that rock has to be under to create granite. So he had a lot of different explanations for granite. But again, if they rained down on a newly forming Earth that was the remains of Tiamat, and there was a worldwide ocean with all of this heat, that transformed these petrified flesh into igneous rock. So when people tell you that igneous rock cannot be consistent with being petrified flesh, they're not thinking that far back. They're only thinking pre-flood, and those heat conditions definitely didn't exist during that time, at least towards the surface. And this, I didn't write Pangea in here, but this brings up Pangea. I was also the first to use expanding Earth, okay, to better explain that Pangea was not an island on one side of the Earth with a worldwide ocean around it, and it just went cruising apart and drifting apart. Rather, using the expanding Earth, which did explain this, that the crust blew up and went outward, and the Earth, if you shrunk it down, fits together like a puzzle piece. I used hollow Earth to solidify that, okay? And my thinking with Pangea and expanding Earth is this. The Atlantic ocean floor is only about 140 million years old, arguably, with carbon dating. The Pacific side is less than that, only 75 million years old, right about the time that the dinosaurs were wiped out, okay? It is my contention that the Earth was struck after formation and slowly expanding, slowly out of the water, about 140 million to 220, 250 million years ago. Somewhere in there, it was hit and it slowly started expanding. Then we were hit again on the Pacific side this time, and it expanded even faster and further, so fast that it's cracking open all over the surfaces of the Pacific side. We see this all over the news lately. And it's expanding so fast that it's subducting or riding over in some parts the crustal material pretty much all over the Atlantic side, pushing up the Himalaya mountains and the other mountain ranges along on Earth, okay? Like a lopsided balloon. And so this brings us to gold. Now, Zachariah Sitchin as well talked about the Sumerian tablets, and he talked about the Nephilim of Nibiru coming to the Earth and to Mars. The Nephilim that came from Nibiru to Earth were called the Anunnaki, and those that went to Mars were called the Igigi. And gold was needed, and the Anunnaki started mining it so that could be refined into a gaseous form to repair the ozone on Nibiru. And Nibiru would be part of or a secondary solar system that orbits our sun, Marduk being the one that hit here, and Nibiru being a planet far beyond our regular planets because they had to travel past those planets to get to Earth. Okay, so Nibiru is not Marduk. Can't be. All right? It was pretty much destroyed along with Tiamat, but it survived the battle more than Tiamat did. It just destroyed its outer shell and crust, and it's a big iron giant running around our sun in a long, long elliptical orbit, carrying with it the debris that will impact the Earth again and cause destruction. But anyways, the idea with that is that they got tired of the external exposure of being on the surface of the Earth. It was the radioactivity of our sun, the cold of day and rapid day and night, was taking a toll on the Anunnaki bodies, so they created humans to mine this gold for them. And the gold is used, like I said, the gaseous spray to spray in the atmosphere of Nibiru, which I also said was hollow, all right? Because their surface is very volcanic. And the reason that they needed this gold was because they had a very volcanic surface with a lot of ash, and the ash was diminishing, and they were losing heat in deep space. And every time it comes within proximity to the sun, it was heating up enough to lose atmosphere, a little bit at a time, over time, every time it came around. And so they decided that gold would be a good way to fix it, because originally they tried blasting the surface of the planet to open up the volcanoes, and voila, it didn't work. It actually created more of a problem, less ash. So they had to have gold. They tried mining it in the asteroid belt, which is the remnants of Tiamat, and all their ships were destroyed. So then they came to Earth, which they knew was a part of Tiamat. Okay? And so this is backed up by the stories of the Hopi Indians and other indigenous North American original tribes, backed up by the fact that they talk about the Sky Brothers and that they traded salt with the ant people inside of the intercrustal Earth and or the hollow Earth. And salt is rare inside the planet because we have salt on the outside and fresh water on the inside from the fresh water aquifer springs. So they said that they traded this salt with intercrustal beings through cave entrances. They would go to these intercrustal cities and trade salt, which they would get food stores back and gold. And the gold they would save for the Sky Brothers. So I linked those together myself. Since then, I have seen some other people doing the same thing. There could have been people doing that before. But that is also something that I'm going to share with you in all of this. Okay? I just wanted to give you some of the concepts before we started here. If you guys could, again, subscribe, like, share, do all that stuff, I'd appreciate it. And I forgot to say peace on the last video. I'm going to try to do that. So thank you for watching, and peace, guys. Peace.